Hey, my name's Shanshan. I sell art on shanshan.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review The Gentleman. So The Gentleman's a new film by Guy Ritchie. It's an hour and 53 minutes, a little bit over the hour and a half, but there's quite a little bit of story, so I think that's fine. It's a pretty fast-paced film. You have Matthew McConaughey as Mickey Pearson, this kind of mafia boss with a huge weed empire. Charlie Hunnam is Ray, his first-hand man. Michelle Dockery is Rosalind Pearson, the wife of Mickey, who runs her own kind of car dealership. I think maybe she runs a chop shop, I don't know. Jeremy Strong plays Matthew. Colin Farrell plays Coach, this guy that kind of accidentally gets involved with the mafia by mistake. Well, his players do. Hugh Grant plays Fletcher, who's this reporter, and he's trying to blackmail Mickey. So you have the story starts, Mickey, this reporter comes to the number 2 in command of Mickey, Ray, and he's kind of pitching him this blackmail scheme of $20 million. It's not going to be too much, not too little, but obviously it's a huge amount, $20 million, right? And he has like, oh, I have all these photos, documentation, videos, I got a manuscript, I'm going to sell this to the public. So Ray's like, oh, that's interesting. How much time do we got? 4 days? Okay, we'll think about it. And at the same time, you have Mickey Pearson. He kind of wants to get out of the game. He purchased this other drug dealer who's been 20 years in the game, and he's like, hey, you want to buy the property? I have this hidden farms all over England. He shows them why they're hidden and where they're hidden, which is very tricky in England. They shows the whole operation, and then the next weekend, basically, his farm's broken into, and then he's like, oh my God, what's this? The, buyer for his empire is kind of like getting shaky feet. He's like, I don't know, maybe it's only worth 130 million instead of 400 million now. So there's all these kind of problems that start up, and then there's this series of double crosses between all the different players. So it has a much more laid back feel, I say, than Guy Ritchie's 2 other films, which I own, which is Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Those were when he was a really young director. They had a lot of camera action, really cool transitions, like spinning a revolver and then it spins into the next scene. And none of that's here. He's using all traditional kind of camera transitions, so not super creative on the editing style, but again, that doesn't make or break a film, but it's just more of a, traditional approach to shooting a mafia film, I would say. It seems like he's gone a lot more heavier on the dialogue than his other 2 earlier films, so it's kind of maybe a Tarantino approach where there's a lot of dialogue and goes into the story, which makes for a better story. I don't think he's as good a dialogue writer as Tarantino per se. I like his kind of sharper, shorter dialogue in his 2 earlier films, but I think this works pretty well. One of the things I wasn't sure of in the beginning that I was going to like, he has this reporter, and this reporter's just doing this long, he's like, oh, I have all these documents, let me show you how, and they kind of visually show it, and then they come back and he's like, oh, I got this video, and they visually show it, and then they say, oh, I got this document, and they visually show it. So the visual is fine, but then all this long talk, you're like, I don't know if that's the best way to show the story. In his 2 other versions, there's really, the dialogue is part of the action. So there's really not too many scenes where it's just a lot of dialogue. There are dialogue scenes, but in the earlier films, I felt like that it's just an action sequence and it's going through the story. In this case, as the reporter's telling his story, they're telling the story and then you see the story, but that part of the story feels a little stale. Like, you're going to show it, so why tell it? I don't know how you connect the reporter with the story as far as him tracking him, but I think maybe there would have been a little bit way better way to show that. But, in the end, it works, I think, since it's a blackmail, so you kind of have to explain what he has. The really fun part, I'd say, of the film is there's a lot of double crosses in the film. Obviously, the reporter is kind of double crossing his boss. Instead of getting paid $150,000, he goes to the mafia boss, like, hey, just pay me $20 million, I'm out of the game, I don't want to report anymore. He maybe wants to become a scriptwriter for MGM and Miramax, who actually makes the film, so it's kind of a funny take, suggesting kind of the director might have been a reporter instead of a director. You have Fook, who works for Lord George, and Lord George manages the local heroin dealing, and Fook is kind of sick of working for his uncle, so he wants to kind of displace his uncle. So you have that going on at the same time, which is interacting with Mickey's business, trying to take over Mickey's business and that guy's business at the same time. You have the buyer for Mickey's new business, who's in some other kind of drug trade, and he has the money and has been in the business a long time. I don't know what kind of drugs he's selling. Maybe he's selling cocaine or something. He's working with Fook and then with Mickey, and he's kind of double crossing as well. And so you got all these different interactions in the story where you don't know where the story's going, who's going to get betrayed, who gets killed. Another interesting sequence is in the very beginning of the film, they show what looks like a hit job on Mickey, and you're like, oh my God, they killed the key player. How's this going to work out? Why would they show that key sequence in the very beginning of the film, and then later it changes, so there's a twist. So that scene makes sense at the end, and it's kind of a fun way to have this, shocking. It's almost like Knives Out a little bit, how the plot twists and turns a little bit. It's definitely Guy Ritchie style film. You don't know it's as much Guy Ritchie film because they don't have all those really cool camera sequences he had in his 2 earlier films. I think he's just a more mature filmmaker, so he's kind of laying back off of those kind of gimmicky things. But I really like the gimmicky things. It really makes those transitions really make the movie. Like in Baby Driver, it's really well. Camera shot angle is very interesting, and I think that adds a lot to the film sometimes. But again, I guess, since they're dealing with this upper boss who's been in business 20, 30 years, it wouldn't make sense to use the flashy camera stuff, and maybe it's more the traditional editing sequence matches his style as a mature drug dealer. So I guess that makes sense in a way. Yeah, and like the way he hides the operation's pretty interesting in the film. You have this coach also who is coaching all these local boxers, and the boxers get paid, I think they get paid to rob this guy's farm, and so they get into all the off the deep end, because they're dealing with this major drug dealer. He's like, yeah, you're gonna get us killed, and so the coach agrees to kind of help him out to get him out of that what he owes him. So it's kind of interesting because you have that little bit of a connection to Snatch, and to say where the boxer gets indebted to Brickhouse, and so the coach has been indebted to Mickey per se, so he's paying off his debts by doing 3 favors for him, kind of like baseball, 3 strikes. So there's a lot of great terminology as well. I don't know if it's as good as, say, Snatch, where it had all these Jewish connotation and a language that matched per se of the society. This one's kind of fun because you have some English, you have some American, so it's kind of an interesting blend. It's interesting really to see Hugh Grant playing a British accent. He obviously plays British, obviously before, but this one, you feel it's more of an authentic British accent versus, may say, his other roles maybe felt more, romantic comedy. So it's kind of fun to see him in that role as well. I'd say it's a really fun movie. Definitely probably worth buying and, keeping in your library to play every couple of years. Kind of a fun movie. Like I play Snatch and 2 Smoking Barrels all the time, although I don't know where that copy is. If you guys like this, you can subscribe to my channel below. And I'll see you on the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.